Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Off the Shelf, the podcast where we take books off of our shelves and into our hearts. My name is Julia, and today I'm here with you to welcome the start of a new month by announcing this month's book club read. After that, I think today we'll indulge a little bit again. The fall always makes me feel sentimental and nostalgic, and even more so now that I feel like I've really started on a new and sort of scary and sort of exciting stage of my life, a life after school. I know I've said I might go back, and I haven't changed my mind on that, but until I do, I'm living in a moment where I have to personally set out a lot of new routines and structures that school used to do for me. I have to figure out how to live without the external validation of praise and good grades again. What makes it the most different, though, and maybe the most rewarding and fulfilling, I think, is that I have time again to take time for myself, to realize that some of the hobbies that used to be luxuries for my non-existent leisure time can actually start to step forward a bit in my attention and reclaim the value they deserve in my everyday. Like, I've been wanting to take a pottery class. I have time to go out with my camera and take photos for no reason other than pleasure. I recently actually started driving, and I kind of want to learn more about cars. I also have been meaning to travel again, and I have to renew my passport, but once that is in place, the possibilities are kind of endless. I still have a busy schedule, and things sometimes feel like they're happening really fast and nonstop. But I have the time again to remember that even though I have a responsibility to all those other things in my life, I also have a responsibility to myself, to understand again what it means to give myself time and priority. If September for me always feels like the first leg of a race, when everything is fresh and launching off all at once, then October feels like the second leg, when you've kind of figured out and set your comfortable pace, well before the fatigue begins to set in. It's one of my favorite months of the year, but honestly not because of Halloween or pumpkin spice or corn mazes or even the fall wardrobes or the comfort meals, the baking and cooking that goes on before the stress of the holiday season. I love all of those things too, don't get me wrong, but there's something about the simple things, the crisp in the air, the way that it hasn't usually gotten so cold, or living on Vancouver Island so wet that you can't do outdoorsy things, but not so hot anymore that you go outside and sweat without doing anything at all. The colors, the crunchy leaves, the decor, it's lovely. After the spontaneity of summer, it's a reminder that everyone is on different schedules, and on different paths and at different stages, but that we're all making our way in our own way. It's also a relieving reminder to me that even when things feel like they're kind of falling apart, it can and will be okay. Especially if we wrap ourselves up in cozy sweaters and blankets with friends and tuck into the best of the animated Thanksgiving and Halloween movie specials. And as we get later into the fall and winter, the inevitable seasonal marathon of the Harry Potter movies on ABC Family and Space, and like 3 other channels at least. You can argue with me if you want, but I think traditions like those survive for a reason. They really do something for us in these shortest, darkest days of the year, even in the smallest of ways, that turn out to actually matter a lot. To move on from my extended and probably, honestly, never-ending love letter to the fall, though, as you may know, my goal here today is actually to announce our October book club read. This month, I wanted to spice it up a bit and do something a little bit different. One of my many, many fatal flaws is buying graphic novels and then letting them sit for far too long unread. Especially considering how quick of reads they tend to be for me, this is a silly problem to have. I don't know how I get myself into it. So, what I propose for October is this. I'll still be following my routine of a check-in and a review with you, but instead of focusing on one book, I'd like to do a little bit of a mini lightning round. I have, for myself, taken 2 graphic novels from my shelf, ones that I've been meaning to get to and which strike me for different reasons as fallish and just what I'm wanting in this crisp, spooky season. As usual, of course, I encourage you to read along with me for them, or even just one of them, but I also want to leave this month a little bit more open if you're like me and already own a stack of graphics that you haven't gotten around to yet. There's no need to run out and buy the ones or find the ones I want to focus on. And if you haven't quite cracked into the genre yet, then like I said before, I really so encourage you to give them a shot. I'm really excited about my picks for the month, and I hope that whatever you go for, whether it's the same as my own or different, that they're just what you need this month too. During the month, instead of honing into very, very close specifics and digging deep, I'll do more of a general study on those graphic novels, but generally graphics as a whole, as a format, and share a comparison of my two picks and come up with some thoughts on what works for them, what makes them each valuable to our reading repertoires, and maybe most especially why, at least why I think, they are no less worthy or deserving of being considered literature in the same way of traditional novels. With all of that background and foundation set for us, I guess I'd better get on with my actual book club announcement, right? For October, the two graphics I've picked out for myself, and again, you're welcome to choose the same or to pick out one or two or any number of your own graphics to dive into, are Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks, and Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson. If I get the time, I might also pick up one or two others because God knows I have many that I haven't read yet. But these two seem suitably autumn and Halloween-y. And connecting back to my thoughts on seasonal reading from last month, they are the ones that if I don't read them this fall, they will likely sit on my shelf another year, until I'm feeling harvesty and pumpkinish again. To give you a little taste of what to expect from these reads, I'll share the dust jacket descriptions and a little overview of each before we move on today. Pumpkinheads is a young adult contemporary 2019 release and was co-produced by author Rainbow Rowell and author-illustrator Faith Erin Hicks. You may be familiar with Rowell's other adult or YA releases, both novels and short stories. She writes mostly contemporary romance, but she's also dabbled into a bit of fantasy more recently as well. Some of her most popular books over the past several years include Eleanor and Park, Fangirl, and connected to Fangirl as books within books, the Simon Snow trilogy, beginning with Carry On. She can always be counted on for cute romances, witty dialogue, and characters who are relatable in sometimes unexpected ways. Hicks, on the other hand, has written and illustrated a number of graphic novels and comics in a variety of genres, including everything from the paranormal, the fantastic, and the apocalyptic futuristic to the contemporary, coming-of-age friendship, and sports-related stories, and even drawing for graphic novel adaptations of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Probably her most popular and standout graphic novel series is the Nameless City trilogy, an action-adventure fantasy which shares a lot of the artistic style of Avatar as well. Next time we come together, I'll give my usual, more detailed biography on each of the book's authors, but I wanted to give a little introduction to them each just to start us off. Their styles have collaborated beautifully to bring us this really fun, sweet, and relatable tale of two seasonal work best friends who, like a lot of work best friends, know each other deeply in so many ways and somehow not at all in others. From the summary on the book's inner cover, this is how it is described. Deja and Josiah are seasonal best friends. Every autumn, all throughout high school, they've worked together at the world's best pumpkin patch. They say goodbye every Halloween, and they're reunited every September 1st. But this Halloween is different. Josiah and Deja are finally seniors, and this is their last season at the pumpkin patch, their last shift together, their last goodbye. Josiah is ready to spend the whole night feeling melancholy about it. He's the melancholy type. But Deja's got a plan. What if, instead of moping around and the usual slinging lima beans down at the Succotash hut, they went out with a bang? They could see all the sights, taste all the snacks, and Josiah could finally talk to that cute girl he's been mooning over for 3 years. What if their last shift together was an adventure? Beloved writer Rainbow Rowell and Eisner Award-winning artist Faith Erin Hicks have teamed up to create this tender and hilarious story about two irresistible teens discovering what it means to leave a place and a person behind with no regrets. Unquote. I'm expecting light. I'm expecting adorable. I'm expecting a little bit of angst and a little bit of heartstrings tugging. I'm very excited to share the experience of reading this one with you all. My second pick for the month, as I mentioned, is Brie Paulson's Garlic and the Vampire, which is a middle-grade fantasy graphic and the author's debut publication. Even just the book's cover is preparing me for adorable and endearingly charming, and maybe even a little bit enchanting. It focuses on a garden of sentient veggies brought to life by a witch named Agnes, who employs them in her garden to produce abundant and healthy crops, non-sentient ones, of course, for the local farmer's market. The central character is Garlic, a sweet and uncertain garlic bulb who really itches for adventure, but is held back by both the fact that she loves the work and she has none of the confidence to know that she could make it in the world outside of the garden. She's waiting for a sign to not just tell her to try, but to actually quite literally force her to do so against her better judgment to give it a whirl. This one deals with themes of self-esteem and confidence, facing fears and having courage, friendship and acceptance, both of oneself and of others. Even just from the outset looking at it, I'm kind of in love with it and the art style, and I can't wait to dig in with you. Here is the way the story is described from the back cover. Quote, Garlic feels as though she's always doing something wrong. No matter how much her friend Carrot and kindly witch Agnes encourage her, Garlic just wants to tend her own garden, where it's nice and safe. But when her village of vegetable people learns that a bloodthirsty vampire may have moved into the nearby castle, they all agree that, in spite of her fear and self-doubt, Garlic is the obvious choice to confront him. And with everyone counting on her, Garlic reluctantly agrees to face the mysterious vampire. With humor, heart, and an unusual heroine with more courage than she realizes, Brie Paulson's debut graphic novel is a farm-fresh tale that reminds readers to believe in themselves, and that strangers aren't always as scary as they might seem. Unquote. I'm so excited. Sometimes it's so fun to just kick back a little bit and take something soft onto the brain. Books like this are like brain candy to me, and I really hope that you feel the same way. Coming from multiple years of novel study and literature analysis, I think that to know and understand the importance of having humility and being open about our reading tastes is a huge thing. Like I've said before, classic literature has a great value to us and to our history, but it's not all there is. We can be more than one thing. We can be serious and sophisticated scholars of literature and story, but also at the same time, we can be silly and frivolous and sappy. And we can like and love stories that aren't just about, people being in distress, or imprisoned, or fighting each other, or having their lives taken. Just have some fun with what you read sometimes. Indulge in the brain candy. We'll all come back better from it, I swear. You can read from the Russian and British and French greats without having to swear off anything written in the last 25 years. Now, something sort of connected to this last idea of indulging in light and breezy or brain candy reads for the fun of it is another reading opinion or practice that I'm interested to debate and discuss with you all. That being the issue of rereading. As I'm sure I've made it fairly obvious, I'm really big on rereading books. Maybe it's the sentimental, nostalgic part of my personality, but I love the way that rereading gives you the power of retrospection. It gives you the chance to re-experience a book in a completely new way, with insights into character and plot that are revealed later on. Because none of the surprises or twists are all that surprising anymore, it puts the entire experience at much more ease. Even though betrayals stay betrayals and heartbreak doesn't necessarily go away, taking away the shock of it and knowing that the characters and we can and will come back from that shock helps to, I think, calm us a little bit throughout our journey along with the characters. I find this doubly true with regard to graphic novels. They really highlight for me just how important retrospection can be in terms of understanding the whole of the story and not just a piece or a part of it. On my first read of graphics, sometimes I'm so focused on the words, the conversations, and I burn through how they carry the story on their own without realizing how much I miss by skimming over the illustrations. This is a pretty common experience, I think, for a lot of people used to reading or even trained in analyzing traditional novels. We get so concentrated on the idea that the language carries the story without really taking in the truth that there is so much told through image, through expression, body language, action, and even just through art style and color. Rereading gives us all the power to already know where the story will end up, and it takes away that sense of urgency. And it means that we can take our time with the illustrations and realize that they have a story to tell too, sometimes completely separate from the words themselves. To be honest, one of my greatest joys lately has been jumping back into the stories I read as a kid, those that I talk up to kids at work or recommend to confused and lost parents and grandparents as gifts. And remembering what it felt like to read them for the first time when my identity as a bookie was just starting to form. This can be especially enlightening too, because I often realize in reading that my life experience since childhood brings me a completely new perspective on the book as I reread it. I've talked before about how sometimes now I get partway through a book I read as a kid, and suddenly I realize that the characters I relate most to aren't the protagonists but their parents, guardians, and their mentors. It's such a weird realization to have, to understand just how much I, not just the words I read, have changed in the last, say, 10 years. Pretty recently, I decided to reread both the fourth book of the Percy Jackson series and the first book in the Sisters Grimm series, both books I read when I was quite young and also loved so much. I'm excited to say that both series are still quite reliable sellers with kids today, and that's partly why I was so into the idea of rereading them, to remember why I loved them and to re-experience that love alongside the kids who are experiencing them for the first time. I was also a bit afraid that rereading them as an adult wouldn't hit the same, that they wouldn't stand up to time, but honestly, they really did, and I don't think it was just nostalgia. Jumping back into those worlds, into the lives of the characters and their stories, who at some time meant so much to me, they felt different, but the same as well. It was an easy thing to remember how much I loved them, because those feelings were still all in there, waiting to be woken back up. Sometimes, for me, rereading can even help to remind me why I love reading in the first place, and why that's been such a lifelong love. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with reading slumps, and connected to them, sometimes I get a batch of bad luck, and end up starting 5 or 6 books in a row that I just can't get into, or finishing a string of books that don't do anything for me. In these cases, rereading and falling back into the reliability of a story I know I love can be the perfect cure. In terms of where rereading leads me, it probably comes as no surprise that I am, as I've exposed myself as being both a book collector and a person struggling to make it through my TBR stacks. I really struggle to give books away, especially those that I know once meant so much to me, even if I'm unsure I'll ever get the chance to pick them up again. Sometimes, also, all I want to do is reread, and because of these reasons I have to love it, I find it so hard sometimes to stop myself from doing it and really facing the fact of how many books I have yet to read. Something I think is important to understand, though, is that we rarely read for pleasure because someone else told us we should, or because we told ourselves we have to. We read for pleasure because it's fun. And sometimes that means it can be enlightening and life-changing, and other times it means that it brings us nothing more than that pure, blissfully naive joy. It means that sometimes we open our minds to what's new, but on the other hand, sometimes we owe it to ourselves to take it back and relax into the comfort of a book that feels like home. The second that reading becomes a stressful thing, something that we feel puts more obligation onto us than it's worth, it stops being productive and constructive to us. In the end, wherever you're at, if you love to reread or not, it means very little. What connects us all as bookies is the simple love of reading. And that's something that I want so badly to hold on to in this world that sometimes feels like it's always moving along, forward, faster with every minute. If you're interested, weigh in on this topic with me. I wouldn't say it's a necessarily divisive issue, really. If you think that rereading is a waste of time, I'm not going to be hurt. I bow down, probably, to your minimalism, to your ability to give away books as soon as you finish them, and not ever regret the decision. I could never. But if it works for you, then it's okay, and it's good. And as long as you keep on reading, I think we can find things to agree on too. I hope this month that you all decide to pick up a graphic novel or two with me, whichever picks you might go with, and I hope that you find something in them that you think is wonderful. Until next time, take good care and happy reading. The Off the Shelf podcast is a proud member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. To learn more about this podcast or the network, please visit ordinarypodcast.com. Finally, thank you for listening, and if you haven't already, please subscribe or leave us a comment. Thank you so much, and take care.